Welcome, technical leads, CTOs, and engineering directors, to this executive briefing explainer. I'm stepping in as your infrastructure consultant today, and we're zeroing in on one massive priority: efficiency. Specifically, we are going to walk through the strategic migration of your daily AI workloads from Anthropic's Opus tier down to the Sonnet tier. Look, if you're building at the frontier of agentic AI, this is a transition you need to be actively managing right now to optimize your total cost of ownership.
All right, let's just quickly glance at our roadmap. We've got 6 main stops: the disruptive truth, benchmarks and pricing, technical migration, efficiency and ROI, security and HIPAA, and finally, phased rollout.
Okay, section 1, the disruptive truth.
So let me start off by asking a pretty blunt question. Why are you still overpaying for Opus in your daily operations? I get it. A lot of teams deployed Opus as their default model because, well, it was the absolute best available at the time. But the landscape has completely shifted. For the vast majority of business applications, running daily operations on the heaviest, most expensive model tier isn't a technical necessity anymore. Frankly, it's just a legacy configuration, and it is draining your budget. Here's the wild part. We're talking about a massive 5x cost reduction for output tokens, plus a huge drop in input costs when you move from Opus to Sonnet. And the real disruptive truth here? You achieve this 5x savings without sacrificing an ounce of quality. In fact, for most of your everyday tasks, you're actually going to gain speed and accuracy.
Moving right along to section 2, benchmarks and token pricing.
We're not just throwing financial claims around. The technical benchmarks absolutely back this up. If we compare the previous flagship Opus 3 against the mid-tier Sonnet 3.5, Sonnet jumps to 59.4% on GPQA graduate-level reasoning. That comfortably beats Opus. On HumanEval, which tests code generation, Sonnet hits a staggering 92%. Across general knowledge and mathematical reasoning, the cheaper, faster model is literally outperforming the heavier legacy model. And this dynamic definitely holds true for the newer generations as well. Sonnet 4.6 sits at this optimal sweet spot of just $3 per million input tokens and 15 outgoing. Meanwhile, Opus 4.8, which is incredibly powerful, no doubt about it, is priced at $5 in and $25 out. The ongoing architectural tiering is crystal clear here. Sonnet is your daily driver, while Opus is reserved for that highly complex, agentic heavy lifting.
All right, let's jump into section 3, technical migration.
So how do we actually execute this? The initial technical switch is beautifully simple. We're often talking about a single API parameter update in your code. You're just swapping out that older Opus model string for the newer Sonnet string. But hey, in an enterprise environment, we don't just swap a string in production and cross our fingers, right? Here is your parallel testing checklist. First, update the parameter in your staging environment. Second, you run parallel testing for a full week. You need to send the exact same prompts to both Opus and Sonnet simultaneously and compare those outputs. Third, thoroughly verify data integrity across your specific edge cases. You're looking for any regressions in how the new model handles complex prompt constraints. Only once you verify that data integrity do you move to step 4, switching your live production traffic over.
Next up, section 4, efficiency and ROI.
Once you flip that production switch, the financial mechanics hit you immediately. Let's look at a sample operations workload. Say a medium-sized team processing 50 million input and 10 million output tokens a month. On Opus, that workload runs you $1,500 a month. On Sonnet, that exact same workload drops to $300. When you take those numbers and model out potential usage spikes using a 5-year cost projection framework, this simple swap equates to tens of thousands of dollars in reclaimed budget. You're slashing your total cost of ownership, and you haven't even touched your actual application logic. And we can push this efficiency even further. Have you looked at the batch processing API for asynchronous workflows? Doing that cuts operational costs by another 50%. So that $300 monthly bill, it drops to $150. You're saving nearly $2,000 annually on just a single high-volume workflow. Trust me, your CFO is going to love you for this. Plus, by implementing prompt caching for your long context windows, you'll significantly reduce response latency, right down to that 7 to 10 second mark, while driving long-term operational costs down even more.
Now, as an expert consultant, I've got to give a strategic concession here. Opus is absolutely not obsolete. It remains the ideal choice for highly complex agentic coding, multi-file code-based refactoring, and very specific edge case reasoning tasks. You really should establish clear criteria for your teams.
If a task requires autonomous multi-step reasoning where mistakes are highly penalized, Opus is still your safety net. But for everything else, Sonnet is the way to go.
Let's pivot to Section 5, Enterprise Security and HIPAA.
Because obviously, as we optimize costs, we absolutely cannot sacrifice our data boundaries. For the CTOs tuning in, I want to assure you, your enterprise security controls will actually tighten during this infrastructure overhaul. Transitioning to Sonnet lets us simultaneously roll out Anthropic's most advanced security configurations for the enterprise ecosystem. So here's how this builds out our HIPAA-ready compliance framework. Step 1 is making absolutely sure you are strictly using the enterprise or team plans, which guarantee they aren't training models on your data. Step 2 is non-negotiable for regulated industries. You must request and activate the Zero Data Retention, or ZDR, addendum. This means no prompts or outputs are ever stored on Anthropic servers, period. And finally, configure your custom data retention limits so they match your organizational compliance policies perfectly.
Next, we have to talk about access and auditing. You must enable SAML 2.0 single sign-on and enforce a SIM domain capture. Think of this as an automated bouncer. It closes shadow account loopholes by forcing all users into your managed workspace. Then, route your OpenTelemetry audit logs directly to your security dashboards, whether that's Splunk or CloudWatch, so your security team can monitor all file reads and tool calls. Finally, enforce organizational spend limits per API key. That way, an anomaly or a compromised key doesn't result in a heart-stopping AWS bill at the end of the month.
And finally, Section 6, Phase Rollout and Access. With our security perimeter locked down, we arrive at deployment. Here is the prioritized, phased schedule we highly recommend for a totally stable rollout. Week 1 is all about your infrastructure, setting up your SCIM configurations, SSO, and audit logs. Week 2 is that parallel testing phase we discussed earlier to verify data integrity. Week 3 is dedicated to staff access training. And Week 4 is the big one, the final production switch to route your live traffic over to Sonnet. Now, during that Week 3 staff training, you need to establish some really strict access rules for handling sensitive data. First, employees should never paste raw credentials into chat interfaces. You inject secrets at the infrastructure layer only. Second, mandate human checkpoints for any irreversible actions generated by agentic models. Third, here's a pro tip. Use the ultra-fast Haiku model as a firewall to pre-screen user inputs for PII or prompt injection attacks before they even reach the main Sonnet model. And lastly, remind your teams that outputs from asynchronous enterprise tools like CalWork should always be treated as initial drafts that require a human review. I want to leave you with a bit of a provocative thought to wrap things up today. We've established the technical viability, and we've laid out the security framework, but zoom out and think about the business impact for your non-technical leadership. If Sonnet drastically outperforms Opus at a fraction of the cost, what new innovations could your team build with all that reclaimed budget? The operational stability and massive ROI unlocked by this migration isn't just about saving a few bucks. It's about reallocating your resources to push your product roadmap even further. Thanks for joining me for this explainer, and happy building.